Surulere's evening wind always smelled like pepper soup and hot dust. It was the kind of smell that could carry a person's hunger and dreams in the same breath. Nonso Okiye stitched by the window of the one room he shared with his mother, the singer machine rattling like a keek. On the hanger, a mermaid gown bloomed with hand-sewn glass beads. Nothing expensive, but they caught the light in a way that made the small room feel like a runway. Nonso, dark-skinned with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to make miracles from leftovers, checked the hem and smiled. It was a submission for the Lagos New Wave Designer Showcase, a contest known to change lives overnight. He'd sewn it between food deliveries for a dispatch company and midnight tailoring gigs. His mother, Mama Efima, battled hypertension. Hospital bills had turned their savings into smoke. "You will go and win," she said, tying her headscarf with firm hands. "Remember your father's hands. Tailoring is in your blood." His father's memory hovered like the scent of chalk, an artisan who'd once cut patterns for Maison Ebel, the biggest fashion house in West Africa, before downsizing turned their family's certainty into rent-a-raise. Nonso never forgot how it felt to stand beside his father outside the glass doors of the brand's Victoria Island headquarters, both of them invisible to the perfumed gatekeepers who didn't look down. The contest finals were inside Eco Convention Center, all spotlights and camera cranes. Influencers buzz in neon, journalists in lanyards, models as tall as stories. Nonso wheeled his garment bag past a wall-sized banner, Maison Ebel, where Africa wears a future. He felt that old sting, admiration tinged with something harder. Backstage, assistants sprinted. Steam rose from presses. A handler assigned Nonso a rack near the exit. On the next rack hung a cascade of metallic silk embossed with a Maison signature palm motif. He didn't need the tag to know he stood inches from the empire. The Ebel logo winked like an eye. He fixed his eyes on his work. His model, BC, slipped into the gown. The beadwork kissed her collarbones, and for a second the room went quiet. Even the steam seemed to hold its breath. "You made this on that old singer." BC whispered, 2 broken needles and 3 burned fingers, but yes. He laughed. The show unfurled in thunder. Music, strobes, cloth moving like water. When BC stepped out, the whole took a collective inhale. Phones lifted. A fashion editor in the front row, one of the hard ones, tilted her head, interested. Nonso waited in the wings, palms wet, jaw clenched. After, the judges asked him questions: construction, fabric sourcing, margins of scaled. He answered plainly, eyes steady. In the corridor, a short woman with a headset stopped him. "Chief Obinna Ebel himself saw your piece," she said. "He wants to meet you." The chief, the founder. Nonso swallowed. The room he entered was quiet marble and expensive silence. Chief Ebel, tall, dark-skinned, head silvering, shook his hand firmly. Beside him stood a woman in a white satin suit, wrists stacked in bangles. Chiamaka Ebel, the chief's only daughter, the tabloid's favorite fashion heiress. Her eyes were cool, curious, and dismissive in the same second. "You cut clean lines," the chief said. "There's heart in your work. Come apprentice with us for a season. Let's see how your hands speak in our language." Nonso's ribs expanded with a mix of pride and warning. Maison Ebel was a house that had never once looked down to see his father's open palms. Still, this was oxygen. This was hospital bills paid. This was a key into rooms he had only pressed his face against. He signed a 3-month apprenticeship. On his way home, he rode the back of a bike through the 3rd mainland bridge wind. The city stretched like a beadwork skyline. He pressed a hand to his chest and promised the night sky, "I will not be swallowed. I will arrive fully myself." He did not notice the way Chiamaka watched his back as he left, a smile like a tiny blade. Maison Ebel's headquarters on Victoria Island was a cathedral of glass, palm trees reflected like green flames in its skin. Inside was another world, climate-controlled halls, soft music, a laboratory of fabric. Men and women with melanin rich as cocoa moved with the choreography of a brand that understood spectacle. Nonso's first day began with a tour. He saw the fabric vault, temperature and humidity controlled, the leather room, smelling like earth and money, the atelier, flooded with white light. It was the opposite of his Surulere room, and he missed a mess. An assistant named Jimmy handed him a tablet and a badge. "Report to Studio 3. You'll shadow senior creative, Taupe, and assist on the resort collection. In Studio 3, he recognized the voice before he saw the face. So this is a savior, Chiamaka said. She wore a black slip dress and a smirk. Cameras loved her. Mirrors loved her. Mercy didn't. The one the blogs are calling the people's couturier. I suppose we're doing charity now. Nonso nodded, neutral. Good morning, Ma. Don't ma me, she said lightly. I'm not your market customer. Taupe, a soft-spoken genius with precise fingers, cut the tension. We don't do egos in here, she said without raising her voice, which somehow made it scarier. We do work. For weeks, Nonso did work. He learned the house's pattern language, how to make seams disappear like secrets, how to reinforce a bias cut so it draped like prayer. He carried bolts, brewed coffee, made himself small when necessary and present when it counted. People noticed. Assistants started asking for his eye. A junior stylist begged for his help with a tricky fit. Taupe started leaving more fabric in his station, a silent test. The chief walked through sometimes, hands behind his back, saying little, seeing everything. One afternoon he watched Nonso alter a bodice calmly, then grunted approval. You have your father's quiet, he said, and moved on. Chiamaka's presence was lightning in glass, visible, dangerous. She lived in headlines and on runways, in yacht photos and charity galas. She was also in the atelier more often than the blogs would guess, arguing about pleats, pushing for cuts that would make the brand younger. Sometimes her ideas were good. Sometimes she wanted a viral moment more than a garment that would last past the season. One night, 2 weeks of the Maison Ebel Gala, they ran a late rehearsal. The caterers occupied the kitchen. The atelier hummed. Nonso worked on a last-minute adjustment for a gala showpiece, a whisper of a dress in liquid gold silk that pooled like sunset. Chiamaka stormed in with a ring-light crew, trailing a videographer. Just a quick BTS for the fans, she chirped. She saw the gold dress and stopped. That's the one I'm wearing. Taupe looked up. We haven't assigned it. I'm the face, Chiamaka said. There's nothing to assign. Taupe's eyes held, then dropped. We'll see after we get fit. Nonso kept his head down, but Chiamaka's attention drifted to him anyway. You, she said, walking over, people's couturier. Tell me this, should the slick go higher? He measured with his eyes. Higher would cheapen the line. Ma, it's more powerful where it is. Who asked for powerful? She said sweetly. I asked for men to drop their phones. He met her gaze. Power makes him put the phone down too. For 1 second, something like amusement crossed her face. Then she laughed and moved on. The gala night arrived like Harmattan lightning. Ikoize shimmered with money. The red carpet seethed. Cameras flashed so fiercely you could forget the sky. Inside, the runway sliced the room. Tables glittered with hired smiles. Backstage, Nonso felt the room tighten. A zipper failed. A heel snapped. A zipper pulled. He fixed quietly, hand swift. Chiamaka swept in late, hair a high, glossy wave, lips painted the kind of red that becomes a headline on its own. She saw him pinning a strap on a model and rolled her eyes. The hospital lights in Onneken were a violence of their own. Emergency swallowed him. A nurse murmured, 2nd degree, maybe deeper. Stay with me. A doctor with careful eyes worked in short, efficient sentences. Cooling gel, analgesic, dressings like thin oceans. Breathe, the nurse said. Breathe for me. In the waiting area, Jimmy called Nonso's mother. When Mama Efima arrived, her wrapper was inside out, ash from the coal pot smudged on her forearm. She held his unbandaged hand and prayed in Igbo, voice steady but full. Nurses stopped to listen because some prayers cut through walls. News traveled in Lagos like thunder crossed tin roofs. By morning, the internet had the video, a shaky clip of a glamorous heiress, a pot, a shout, a splash, a scream. Captions multiplied like spores. #Justice for Nonso trended beside #boycott Maison Ebel. Commenters became juries. Thought pieces bloomed by afternoon. A TV host cried on air unhelpfully. Police officers visited, crisp and cautious. Taupe came, eyes with no makeup, an offering of silence and fruit. I'm sorry, she said, and meant more than just a night. The chief arrived at dusk, tie loosened, the weight of legacy hanging from his shoulders like an anchor. He entered with that old hush-money breath, the smell of envelopes and tired apologies. MBA, Mama Fema said, standing between the chief and the bed. Don't start with "we are sorry," as if my son is tea you have spilled. If not for God, he would be a corpse. The chief nodded, took the scolding like a church elder. I came to listen, he said, and to pay for the best care. House bills, everything. The best care is justice, she said. Justice is expensive, he replied softly. Then be ready to pay it. The police interviewed. Witnesses spoke. The caterer staff swore. The portable stove was examined. The pot, the video metadata. Lawyers called other lawyers. A simple narrative tried to get complicated. Was it an accident? A crime? A brand strategy gone feral? Meanwhile, Nonso learned his new face. Nurses changed dressings. He learned to breathe into pain as if it were a guest he could sit beside without running. In the mirror, he saw red and white geography on his left cheek, a raw coastline that would be a country he would live in now. He did not cry in front of his mother. Alone. He did, once, quietly, chest shaking with the grief of all the faces he would no longer inhabit. Friends came from Surulere with banter and jollof, pretending all was the same and better. Beasy whispered, "You are still beautiful." He said, "Beauty is the gowns." She said, "Liar." Journalists camped outside. The hospital placed security. Every morning, a note arrived from an expensive PR firm. Unforgettable condemns violence. We stand with artisans. We will do the right thing. The comments underneath were a bonfire. On the third day, Jamaica came. She wore no makeup, which felt like a costume on her. She stood at the foot of the bed with 2 policemen and a lawyer. Her hands shook. Maybe that was performance. Maybe it was human. Say what you came to say, Mama Fema said. Her voice didn't tremble. I am sorry, Jamaica said. It was an accident. I was startled. I would undo it if I could. Nonso stared at the bandage on his cheek in the reflection of the dark TV screen. I don't know what to do with your apology, he said. It won't sew my face. I will pay for anything, she said, voice going hard to hide a tremor. Treatment abroad. The best surgeons. I will. Stand in the dock, Mama Fema snapped. That is what you will do. The lawyer cleared his throat. We're exploring a restorative agreement. Justice, Mama said again, a bell that refused to stop ringing. The chief, who had waited outside, stepped in now. He took in the room, the bed, the mother, the son, the cameras that would read the scene later, and he made a calculation that looked like a bow. Allow us to fund all treatment, to admit guilt publicly, to submit my daughter to community service and restorative justice oversight, and to create an artist fund in your son's name for young designers from low-income homes. Let us do it in public, not as a cover, but as a beginning. The room hummed with shock. It was less cynical than expected. It was also a strategy, and the criminal matter. Jimmy asked quietly. We will not obstruct it, the chief said. If the state must prosecute, we will not by the court. Mama Fema's eyes, old and bright, searched his face for the lie. You will also pay for his mother to sleep at night, she said. In this Lagos, sleep is the most expensive thing. I will, the chief said, and for once sounded like a father, not an empire. Nonso looked at Chiamaka, not the headline, but the person shaking under a too-thin jacket. Anger flared, pity flared, both dimmed. He was too tired for either to be home. If there will be any healing, he managed, it must be useful, not theater. The chief nodded once. Then let us begin with something useful. Restorative justice in Lagos is often whispered like a rumor. This time, they wrote it down. Lawyers met in rooms with cold air and hot tea. The agreement had teeth. 1. Medical care in Lagos and, if necessary, abroad, covered fully by Unforgettable. No caps, no within reason clauses. 2. Public admission of wrongdoing by Chiamaka on the same platforms that had made her famous, without PR euphemisms. 3. Community service, 1,000 hours at the Phoenix ward, the burn unit the chief would endow at the teaching hospital, with duties assigned by the ward head nurse, not by press officers. 4. Artisan Justice Fund, 250 million Nigerian naira received to sponsor training, grants, and workspace for low-income designers, managed by an independent board including a representative chosen by Nonso and one by the Association of Tailors. 5. Employment and autonomy. When, and only when, Nonso chose, he could return to Maison Ebel as associate creative, with a contract guaranteeing creative autonomy on a capsule collection built around adaptive design and scar-friendly aesthetics, garments that made room for bandages, compression masks, sensitivity. 6. No interference with any criminal proceedings. Mama Efima read each clause slowly, lips moving, finger underlining. She asked hard questions. Who audits this fund? Who hires the nurses? What happens when your board changes? She was the fiercest lawyer in the room without a certificate. The day they signed, the internet held its breath. This wasn't the usual choreography. It was messy, human, expensive, public. It would still be called PR by many. Perhaps it was, and perhaps good PR can be forced into doing good. The press conference was deliberate and spare. No step-and-repeat backdrop, no champagne. Just a hospital hall, the chief, Chiamaka, Tope, the head nurse, a representative of the Tailors Association, and Nonso, face bandaged but unhidden. The chief said, "We did harm. We will do repair. We will be audited." Chiamaka took the MIC. Her voice was small, but it did not wobble. "I acted with arrogance and recklessness," she said. "What I did was violence. I am ashamed. I will make restitution with my hands, not my words." A reporter shouted, "Are you scared of prison?" "Yes," she said, "but I am more scared of remaining the kind of person who could do what I did." It was a good line. It was also, perhaps, real. Then Nonso spoke. He spoke not like a victim, but like a foreman. "We cannot stitch the past," he said, "but we can cut forward. Let this be better than a headline. Let it be a pattern others can follow when harm happens. Admit, repair, submit to the law, and build." The comments were a marketplace, the generous, the cynical, the trolls, the saints. Meanwhile, work began. The Phoenix Ward took delivery of new beds. The fund hired a program manager who'd grown up in Ajigun and made it to London on a scholarship before returning to Lagos to the confusion of her uncles. Application forms went live in English, Pidgin, and Yoruba. The logo was simple, a needle and a flame, side by side, not in opposition. At home, Mama Efima cooked egusi with the first real smile in weeks. "You spoke like a man," she told her son, "and like a tailor." At night, when sleep finally returned in soft pieces, Nonso dreamed in fabric. The burn ached like weather, but slowly he understood it was not a foreign country. It was a new neighborhood in the city of his body. He would learn its streets. Weeks later, Tope sent a message. No pressure. Studio 3 misses your noise. When you are ready, bring your stubbornness in your new eye. He read it 3 times. He looked at his mirror. The bandages had shrunk to smaller dressings. The skin underneath looked like a coastline after a storm. Raw, strange, alive. He typed, "I will come on Monday. But I will not be small again." She replied with a single emoji, a needle. Monday smelled like rain and wet earth. The Maison's glass doors hissed open and every conversation paused. Lagos officers love spectacle. They hide it badly. Nonso walked in wearing a plain black tee and tailored trousers. He cut himself with a slightly higher rise to avoid friction on the dressing. He wore his compression mask openly, the kind burn patients use while healing. It made strangers stare. He let them. Jimmy met him with a hug that startled him. "We will fight anyone who tries nonsense," she whispered, starting with a receptionist if necessary. He laughed, grateful. Studio 3 had been scrubbed of tension. Tope had a way of setting the weather. She held him at arm's length, looked at him like a mother and a commander, and said, "Welcome back. We're not fragile. We're also not rushing. You lead the pace." He nodded, throat tight. On his table lay a stack of muslin and a card in clean handwriting, adaptive capsule, working title Second Skin. Meet 10:30. Beside the note sat a plain white compression hood, custom, Seams move away from pressure points. Closures soften with bias-bound edges so they wouldn't print into healing skin. It was both a garment and a love letter to function. He ran his fingers along the seam. Who made this? Taupe tilted her head behind him. She did. Chiamaka stood in the doorway, a tray balanced awkwardly in her hands. Mugs, tea bags, a jar of honey. It should have looked ridiculous on her. It looked exactly right. She set it down like a peace offering she did not deserve but would carry anyway. I asked the ward nurse about the complaints patients had. She said, voice careful, stiff closures, scratcher seams, heat. We tried to fix those in this sample. We can test more. Nonso's jaw worked. He sipped A. Taupe, tactful, called the team to a different table for a 5-minute check-in, which magically lasted 30 and left the two of them alone by accident on purpose. You shouldn't be here, Nonso said, but without heat. The ward needs your hours. I did my hours this morning, she said. Changed dressings. Was yelled at by an auntie for standing on the wrong side of the bed. I'm learning. Silence stretched. The rain touched the windows like fingers. I don't know how to be with you, he said finally. Every time I look at you, I remember fire. And then I remember the word. And then I remember that you stayed when the camera left. These things live together and fight in my chest. I don't know how to be with me either, she said. I am learning not to be the most important person in the room. He touched the seam again. This is good work. She let out a breath she had been holding for days. Teach me to make it better. Work, that faithful translator, took over. He talked and her hands moved. He showed her how to shift a seam to save a nerve, how to cut a neckline that wouldn't rub a graph raw, how to hide strength in places garments usually ignore. She took notes like a novice and a CEO at once. At 10:30, the team gathered. Taupe made it formal but warm. Associate creative, address your people, she said with a glint that made him less afraid. He laid out his vision. Second skin, a capsule for bodies that heal in public and private, for scars that needed shade, for bandages that needed breathing room, for dignity where fashion often offers only spectacle. He sketched quickly, explaining vents for masks, lining choices, closures patients with limited mobility could manage with one hand. He added pieces for lovers and caregivers, so healing didn't isolate style. When he finished, the room was quiet in the good way. Taupe said, approved. Build it. We'll present in 3 weeks. Chefs don't ask permission to salt. Later, in the corridor, a junior intern approached shyly with a phone. So, should we include you in the BTS? He glanced at Chiamaka, who shrugged. He looked at the intern. Yes, he said, but show hands. Show process. Show the ward, not just me. The intern grinned. Content with sense. I hear you. By afternoon, he and Chiamaka walked to the Phoenix ward to test a prototype hood with the head nurse's guidance. The ward smelled clean, antiseptic and boiled yam. Somehow, in bed 7, a young welder from Mushin adjusted his dressing with slow fingers. Brothers, he said, eyes widening. NAU be that designer for TV? Omo. I'd die, Nonso said, smiling with half a face and a whole heart. He lifted the prototype. I want to try this on you, only if you are willing. If you don't like it, we'll change it. Make we try, the young man said. They fitted it gently. The nurse checked pressure points. The welder's eyes softened. This one no day scratch. Sweet me. Chiamaka's eyes filled. She blinked hard and turned away, pretending to check a seam. He saw it and looked away too, pretending to read a chart. They were learning to let usefulness be the intimacy they could afford. On the way back to the studio, the rain had stopped, the city glowed rinsed. In the lift, they stood in a silence that felt less jagged. People will say this is PR, he said. People will be right, partly, she replied. Everything is performance until it isn't. I will keep showing up until even I forget which part is acting. He nodded. Good. Show up tomorrow at 7. We're redrafting the color. She smiled like someone offered a sentence instead of a verdict. Yes, so. As the doors opened, he caught their reflections in the chrome, a scarred man and a woman learning penance, both dark-skinned, both altered by the same fire, walking into a room where fabric waited to become the future. He didn't know what the end would be. He didn't trust the endings. But for the first time since the oil, he felt something like forward. The courthouse smelled of Polish and impatience. Reporters jostled outside. Banners screamed justice for Nonso and no mercy for Maison money. Although the restorative agreement was signed, the state still pursued a charge of reckless endangerment. Cameras clicked each time Chiamaka entered. Dressed in gray and humility, no makeup, hands clasped like prayer. Inside, the chief sat stone still, while Nonso and his mother stayed behind the prosecution table, calm, faces uncovered. The public wanted a villain. He wanted resolution. The prosecutor read aloud. In a moment of willful carelessness, the accused caused grievous harm. Each sentence replayed the scream, the oil, the viral video. Then, unexpectedly, Nonso stood. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I don't ask for her imprisonment. I ask that the law record what was done and that she be made useful. Let her continue her work at the Phoenix Ward. Let her finish what she started. Punishment without reform is wasted fire." Gasps rippled. Even the judge blinked twice before nodding slowly. "Mr. Okoye, the court recognizes mercy as a virtue, but not an excuse. The accused will complete her community service under state supervision and remain under probation. Record it." The gavel struck. Outside, journalists shouted questions. Nonso said only, "Pain gave me a new language. I won't let it speak only revenge." The video of his statement went viral again, but this time for grace. That night, he walked home through Surulere, fans chanting his name like a folk hero. Yet he knew fame burns faster than oil. Inside, he just wanted silence. At the Phoenix Bone Ward, white walls hummed with machines and whispered courage. Chiamaka arrived at dawn daily, scrubbing floors, changing sheets, and folding gauze. At first the nurses watched, ready to scold. Then, slowly, they softened. She bandaged children who flinched at mirrors. One tiny girl asked, "Auntie, your hand fine. You day fear fire too." Chiamaka smiled sadly. "I used to. Now I fear my own pride more." Nonso began visiting weekly to fit adaptive clothing for patients. Their paths crossed over stretchers and sewing tables. Their words grew less barbed, more weary, more honest. One afternoon, she found him fixing a sleeve for a boy missing half his arm. She watched him alter the pattern. "Why don't you let me help?" she asked. He passed her a scissor. "Cut along that chalk line. No higher, no lower." She cut. Her hand trembled. Still higher. He looked at the line. Perfect. It was the first compliment he had ever given her. Later, when the ward lights dimmed, the nurse teased, "Our designer and our heiress, fire and water, they're learning to boil without burning." Chiamaka flushed. Nonso laughed. For the first time, the sound didn't sting. Outside, tabloids still feasted on them. But inside the ward, something quieter bloomed, a language of redemption. Maison Ebel was bleeding money. Sponsors withdrew. Celebrity endorsements evaporated. Investors demanded rebranding or resignation. The chief called a private board meeting. Nonso was summoned, not as staff, but as a consultant. Chiamaka sat at the opposite end, silent. An investor from Paris slammed a file down. "Your brand is poison. You need a face of integrity, not scandal." Chief Ebel's gaze moved from his daughter to Nonso. "What if integrity and scandal became one story?" he said quietly. "What if the man we wrong designs a house we save?" Murmurs exploded. Nonso froze. Chiamaka looked up sharply. "Father, don't." He cut her off. "You made the fire. He built from the ashes. That is a future we sell now, rebirth." The board voted. 6 in favor, 2 against. Maison Ebel rebranded as Maison Phoenix, merging with the Phoenix Ward's humanitarian vision. Headlines screamed, "From victim to visionary, the scarred designer leading fashion's rebirth." Nonso wanted to hide, but duty pulled him back. If the empire would profit from his pain, he'd make sure it also paid others healing. Back in Surulere, Mama Efima laughed through tears. "God has strange tailoring hands," she said. See how he joined pieces none of us planned. Weeks into the Maison Phoenix revival, work swallowed everyone. Nonso directed fittings. Chiamaka handled PR but deferred to him with quiet discipline. One long night, they found themselves alone in the atelier, surrounded by unfinished gowns and the smell of steam and starch. Power cut flickered. The backup lights cast amber halos. "Remember the night you poured oil on me?" he asked suddenly. She froze. "I think about it less now," he continued. "But sometimes I still feel the heat in my dreams." "I think about it every hour," she whispered. "Not just the act, the kind of person I was. I've been trying to be someone else ever since." He watched her, then said softly, "Maybe stop trying. Just be useful. It suits you." Tears glistened, but she smiled. "Useful is better than beautiful." "Sometimes it's the same thing," he said. A silence followed, thick with words they didn't say. Then he reached out and adjusted the measuring tape slipping from her neck. "Tomorrow, 7 sharp," he said. "We test the new adaptive jacket. Don't be late." "Yes, sir," she murmured, eyes lingering. When she left, the mirrors around them reflected more than clothes. They reflected the fragile start of forgiveness. The day of the Maison Phoenix debut show arrived. Lagos buzzed. Every influencer, politician, and critic packed the Eco Convention Center again, the same hole where ambition had once burned him. Backstage, models dressed in designs that told a story of scars turned to style, silks cut to mimic healed tissue, metallic threads glinting like fresh skin. Chiamaka coordinated press with calm efficiency. When Nonso's final piece, a black suit with silver thread tracing his scar's exact map, appeared, murmurs became thunder. The lights dimmed. A narrator's voice filled the hall. "Some fires destroy, others refine. Tonight, we will weather proof." The crowd rose. Phones flashed. The chief, tears in his eyes, clasped his hand as though in church. After the show, the press surrounded Nonso and Chiamaka. "Is it true you're partners, in business or love?" someone yelled. He looked at her, then back at the cameras. "We were enemies by mistake, survivors by fire, and now co-creators of something larger than us. Whatever name you give that, call it progress." Later, as confetti fell and the hall emptied, she found him on the balcony overlooking the lagoon. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting me drown in what I did." He turned toward the water, face lit by the city's gold glow. "You're the one who kept showing up," he said. "That's what love looks like sometimes. Not a feeling, just a stubborn attendance." She smiled, small and real. Then maybe love had other plans after all. He chuckled. Maybe it always does. Below them, the lagoon caught the lights like molten metal. For once, the reflection wasn't painful. It was beautiful. Success came faster than peace. After the Maison Phoenix show, every fashion magazine in Africa and Europe wanted a piece of Nonso Okoye, the scarred designer whose tragedy turned into triumph. His face, half marked, half radiant, became the new emblem of authenticity. TV hosts quoted his words about resilience. Fashion bloggers called him Africa's Phoenix. But behind the glamour, storms brewed. Chief Ebel, proud but aging, tried to manage both Nonso's newfound influence and the old investors' greed. The boardrooms began to split, between those who saw Maison Phoenix as a symbol of redemption and those who wanted to monetize the pain more aggressively. At one heated meeting, a European investor slammed his palm on the table. "This empathy campaign sells," he barked. "Keep showing the scar. That's the brand now." Nonso froze. "I'm not your poster for pain," he said evenly. "You're our story," the man shot back. "I'm a designer," Nonso replied. "Not a museum of suffering." Silence followed, thick and electric. Chief Ebel broke it. "Gentlemen, the scar is not our brand. Resilience is. If you can't tell the difference, you don't belong at this table." But Nonso saw something else in the chief's eyes, a flicker of exhaustion, maybe even guilt. Later that night, as the building lights dimmed, he found Chiamaka sitting alone in the atelier, sketching. "You're working late again," he said. She smiled faintly. "Work is easier than memory." He looked over her sketches, roles inspired by African masquerade forms, dramatic, yet serene. "These are beautiful," he murmured. "You're finding your voice." She met his eyes. "I'm trying to use it for good." For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence. Outside, thunder rolled over the Lagos lagoon. The air smelled like a storm, and somehow like healing. A week later, the betrayal came, quietly, like a knife hidden in silk. Maison Phoenix's new global collaboration deal, a multi-million-dollar partnership with a French couture house, was leaked online. But the leaked documents had Nonso's signature forward beneath scandalous clauses that transferred part ownership of the Artisan Justice Fund to a shell company. Within hours, the headlines changed tone. Designer hero or fraud? Did Nonso exploit his own tragedy? Social media turned savage. Some called it a smear campaign, others believed the worst. In the boardroom, chaos reigned. The chief's face hardened with confusion. "Nonso, did you sign this?" "I didn't," Nonso said firmly. "That's not my signature." The room buzzed. Lawyers whispered. Chiamaka clenched her jaw, fury flashing. She stormed out, heels cracking against marble. Nonso followed. "Who would do this?" he asked. "My guess," she said bitterly. "Someone scared of your influence. Maybe an investor or someone inside." That night, she didn't sleep. She dug through files, emails, and call logs until she found a clue, a message trail from a board member named Victor, who had always doubted the partnership with Nonso. She printed the proof and went straight to the chief's mansion in Banana Island at dawn. "Father," she said, slamming the evidence on his table, "you let snakes sit beside you. Look." The chief read the emails, his face darkening with shame. "Victor," he whispered, "has been with me since I built the first showroom in Yaba." "Then has been stealing that long, too," she said coldly. When the chief called an emergency board session, Chiamaka presented the evidence. Victor's eyes darted like a cornered thief. "I did what was necessary for the investors," he shouted. "What you did," Nonso replied quietly, "was what fear always does, sell humanity for profit." The chief fired him on the spot. Cameras caught the moment. Online, the tide turned again, this time with apologies and admiration. That evening, Nonso found Chiamaka watching the sunset over the lagoon. He handed her a paper cup of Zobo. "You didn't have to fight that hard for me," he said. She smiled softly. "I wasn't fighting for you. I was fighting for the man my pride tried to destroy." The silence that followed was no longer awkward. It was intimate. Success returned, but so did ghosts. One evening, while reviewing designs in Surulere, a courier delivered a small brown envelope. Inside was a photo. His father, Chaiko Kuye, smiling beside a younger Chief Ebel. 20 years ago, outside the original Maison workshop. Behind it, scribbled words. He was supposed to be partner, not staff. Asked the chief about the shares. Nonso's pulse quickened. He drove straight to Banana Island that night. "Tell me the truth," he said, voice tight. "Did you cut my father out of Maison Ebel?" The chief looked up slowly, eyes heavy with something worse than guilt. "Your father was my friend. He helped me build the first line. But investors back then, foreigners, they didn't want 2 African names on the deed. I promised I'd fix it later. I never did." Nonso's hand shook. "So my father died a tailor while you became a tycoon." "I built with his dream," the chief whispered. "And now I'm trying to rebuild with his son's forgiveness." Nonso turned away. "Forgiveness isn't a currency you can buy." He left without another word. Days passed. He avoided Maison Phoenix, avoiding both the chief and Chiamaka. But when the chief fell ill suddenly, heart complication from stress, Nonso found himself standing outside the hospital room again, the same hallway where he'd once been the patient. Chiamaka met him there. "He's asking for you," she said. "I don't have words for him." "Then just sit," she replied. "Sometimes silence heals more than speeches." He walked in. The chief lay pale, oxygen mask fogging gently. When their eyes met, there were no titles, only 2 men bound by a broken promise. The chief whispered through the mask, "Finish what I couldn't. Make the name clean again." Nonso squeezed his hand, the gesture saying what words couldn't. That night, For the first time, he called a collection not a revenge, but a continuation. After the Chiefs' collapse, the media and investors panicked. Rumors spread that Maison Phoenix would crumble again. To protect the brand, Nonso stepped forward publicly. He stood on the same runway where his pain had begun and announced, Maison Phoenix is not built on one man's name, but on every hand that stitches hope into fabric. The speech went viral overnight. Orders tripled. Donations poured into the Artisan Fund. But behind the success, the Chief's health worsened. Days turned into weeks in the hospital. Chiamaka barely left his side, sleeping in chairs, running meetings by phone. One evening, as she sat by the window staring into the Lagos skyline, Nonso brought her jollof rice and a small sketch pad. "You need to eat," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "I thought you didn't do pity." "This isn't pity," he said. "It's partnership." They shared a quiet meal. When she fell asleep in the chair, head against the window, he placed his jacket over her shoulders. The gesture was small, but it felt like a vow. The next morning, the Chief passed peacefully before dawn. The funeral drew the entire city. Designers, politicians, tailors, and fans filled the cathedral. Even rival houses closed in respect. At the eulogy, Nonso stepped forward and said, "He made mistakes, but he built something that outlived pride. I stand here not as a victim or heir, but as a man continuing what good he began." When he finished, even Chiamaka's tears glistened with pride. That evening, as mourners left, she said softly, "He always said you were the son he never deserved." Nonso looked at her. Maybe now we both have to become the children he hoped for. Months later, the first Maison Phoenix International Exhibition launched at the Lagos Civic Center. This time, the collection was titled Inheritance. The pieces told a story, from betrayal to rebirth. One dress shimmered like flames caught midday. Another glowed with threads that traced a pattern of heel burns. Models of all shades, shapes, and scars walked proudly. The crowd rose in standing ovation. After the show, Chiamaka joined him backstage, tears in her eyes. "You've done it," she whispered. "You turned what was meant to break you into beauty." He looked at her, then at the stage lights fading into gold. "No," he said quietly. "We did." She laughed softly. "We." "Yes," he said. "You poured the oil that scarred me, but you also poured the hours that heal hundreds. That's how life redeems itself, one wound at a time." He paused, then added, "And for what it's worth, I forgive you." She froze, tears spilling freely this time. "You mean that?" "I do." She stepped closer, trembling. "Then let me spend the rest of my life proving I deserve it." He smiled, eyes soft, voice low. "Let's start with coffee tomorrow." "Coffee," she laughed through tears. "That's all." "For now," he said. "Yes, love had other plans, but it still starts small." They walked out together into the Lagos night, the lagoon glittering like melted gold behind them, two souls stitched together by fire, forgiveness, and the kind of love that only pain can refine. Maison Phoenix's Lagos exhibition cracked open the world. Paris called. Milan beckoned. A Qatari foundation offered a museum show. With success came the old wolves, copycats, opportunists, and consultants selling shortcuts. Nonso and Chiamaka landed in Paris in the blue hour, the Seine like a ribbon of steel. The Maison Phoenix, Inheritance pop-up opened inside a glass pavilion near the Pont Alexandre III. Scarred mannequins shining like statues of survival. Crowds formed. Press swarmed. The story, Fire Refined Us, translated without subtitles. But in a private meeting, a European conglomerate pitched an exclusive acquisition that sounded like rescue and smelled like robbery. "Let us shepherd the brand," the executive said smoothly. "We'll take 70% equity, maintain your story, and scale your impact." Nonso's smile was polite and dangerous. "You can't own a testimony. We can own distribution. Then we'll build distribution." Outside, Chiamaka squeezed his hand. Then new language. "You were magnificent." "You're the one who taught me to hear the strings behind the music," he said. That night, A lawsuit hit from a luxury house in Rome, claiming Maison Phoenix appropriated a seam technique they'd barely popularized. It was a scare tactic to force a settlement. Investors jittered. Social timelines filled with think pieces about African brands rising and the inevitable pushback. Back in Lagos, Mama Efima brewed bitter leaf and wisdom. On a crackly video call, she said, "When a tree grows tall, wind will remember it. Plant your roots deeper." They did. They hired a Nigerian-Italian IP lawyer who knew both runways and courtrooms. The case would take months, but the message was immediate. We're not a headline you can bully. Meanwhile, the Artisan Justice Fund opened its first satellite lab in Yaba, long tables, bright light, industrial machines, and a policy: every intern got paid. The walls were painted with a single phrase: dignity is a pattern. At night, in their Paris rental, Chiamaka sat at the window sketching a bridal silhouette whose bodice echoed the coastline of Nonso Scar. She didn't show him, yet. The Italian suit wasn't the only fire. A Lagos influencer, hungry for chaos, convinced a former Maison employee to reveal that Chiamaka's community service had been staged. The video was slick, the lie graceful. It spread like dry season harmattan. The Phoenix Ward nurses responded with receipts, logs, sign-in sheets, footage of Chiamaka changing dressings at 5:30 a.m., sweeping floors, crying in a storage room and returning to fold towels anyway. The head nurse recorded a short video. If penance were easy, it wouldn't heal. She earned her blisters. The lie withered, but it left a shadow. Does it ever end? Chiamaka asked one evening in Freedom Park, where they'd stolen an hour to breathe. High-life music floated on warm air. The city pulsed like a drum. "No," Nonso said, "but we grow stronger voices." He pulled out a small box, not a ring box, a key. "Phoenix Academy," he said, "Surulere campus. The building deed is ours. I want you to co-found it." Her voice broke. "You're giving me a school." "We're building one," he corrected, "for hands like my father's. For the girls your old friends laughed at. For the boys nobody thought could be graceful." She held the key like a sacrament. "Then teach me the admission criteria." He smiled. "First rule, hunger is a reference letter. And second, humility is a tuition." They laughed, the sound threaded with relief. The academy would open in 6 months. Applications crashed the website in 6 minutes. Paris Fashion Week became their proving ground. The venue, a reproposed metro station, track tunnels lit like veins of gold. The show opened with a model in a suit whose silver thread traced Nonso's sky exactly, worn not by him, but by a survivor from the Phoenix Ward, a woman who had lost her hair and found her courage. Backstage, the IP lawyer texted, "Italian house withdrawing suit. Settlement, 0. They saw your prototype from 5 years ago. Time-stamped. You win." Nonso exhaled. Chiamaka read the message and grinned. "Wind, meet roots." Mid-show, the lights flickered, then went black. A technical failure or planned sabotage. No one knew. Gasps. Chaos loomed. Then, a single hand clap. Another. Drummers, hidden among the guest Panonso contingency plan, rose and began a low, insistent rhythm. Models kept walking, garments catching the drumlight, shadows becoming a new kind of spotlight. Phones lit like fireflies. The blackout became a masterstroke. When power returned, the applause felt like a storm breaking. A critic tweeted, "Only a brand that understands darkness can choreograph its light." Backstage, Nonso and Chiamaka stood forehead to forehead, laughing from the edge of tears. "You planned drummers," she said. "I grew up where Nipa rehearses with you," he said. "Always have a generator, musical or mechanical." Later that night, on a quiet bridge, he finally asked a question that had been pacing inside him. "What are we?" "We are what fire did not heat," she said, "and what love refuses to waste." He nodded, then took her hand. "Walk with me until the light learns our names." She squeezed once. Yes. Back in Lagos, the Phoenix Academy opened with 120 students and 12 instructors in airy studios that smelled like starch and hope. Nonso gave the first lesson, how to listen to fabric before you cut. Chiamaka taught the second, How to name a prize for your spine straight. On the academy's third week, he found her alone in a workroom, pinning a bodice on a dress form. The design was familiar, the coastline of a scar turned into lace. She looked up, caught, shy as he'd never seen her. "It's a wedding dress," she said, voice careful. "I designed it for someone who had learned to love her changed face." "For someone," he teased. "For me," she whispered. "If there's a day." He stepped forward, took the pins from her fingers, and pressed them into the magnetic dish-like ritual. Then he knelt, not dramatic, just sure, on the concrete floor they'd argued about waxing. He opened another small box, this time a ring, gold braided like 2 threads. "I don't promise perfect," he said. "I promise repair. I don't promise fairy tales. I promise the work." She laughed, sobbed. "Yes to the work. Yes to you." Students walking past shrieked. The ward nurses sent voice notes screaming in ululation. Mama Ephema danced with a wooden spoon in the kitchen, calling neighbors before they could pretend they hadn't been listening. That evening, the lagoon wore sunset like silk. They sat on the academy's rooftop among drying muslins, planning a wedding that would be small. Family, ward nurses, the Tailors Association, students who could not afford suits and would be gifted them. "We'll marry where the first cohort can see us," she said. "Let them know what partnership looks like," he replied. "Messy. Messy, useful, beautiful." They married in the Phoenix Academy courtyard, strings of warm bulbs between 2 palms, a Lagos sea breeze riffling the hems. The aisle was a runway of chalk patterns, darts, notches, seam allowances. The vows were short. "I burned a future," Jamaica said, voice steady. "You taught me to stitch one." "I thought my scar ended me," Nonsa replied. "You taught me to call it a beginning." The head nurse blessed them with palm oil on their thumbs, oil as healing, a circle completed. The Tailors Association sang in Igbo, the students cheered in slang. Bisi caught the bouquet with one hand and a laugh. After cake, moin moin cupcakes, because Lagos insists on joy, Nonsa surprised everyone. He unveiled the Phoenix Fellowship, 10 annual, fully funded slots for burn survivors to train in design, business, or nursing, their choice. "We won't be the last story," he said. "We'll be the first of 100. Late into the night, when the music softened and the city exhaled, they slipped away to the empty atelier, the place where their worst day had been remade 10,000 times over into better ones. They stood by the old singing machine he'd insisted the academy keep, memorialized under glass with a small plaque. "From these hands, a house." Chiamaka rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" He considered, "I wish we'd found this without pain." But pain was the only language we both spoke fluently then. Now we've learned others. "Which ones?" "Patience, repair, and this one." He kissed her forehead. "Home." Outside, Lagos breathed, a metropolis built on repairs and second chances. The lagoon blinked with boat lights. Somewhere, a generator coughed and fell silent, and the city held its own pulse. The final shot, if this was cinema, 2 dark-skinned lovers in an atelier's warm light, the camera drifting up past spools of thread and finished gowns, out over the courtyard where students chalked pattern for tomorrow. The title card would read, "They tried to end him with fire. He answered with design. She tried to drown in guilt. She learned to swim in grace." Maison Phoenix didn't make clothes. It made futures. Love, as usual, had other plans.